Hey, what's up again, everybody? It's Mr. McKinney with Module 28's short little preview live lesson. This is all about the Great Depression, which most of you have learned about in elementary school, but just like with most things, we're going to take a South Carolina spin on it for this module. Now, that is what you would see in most large cities, a line of people lined up for free soup, free bread, whatever they can get because they are all unemployed. You can see there is one African American there. Some of these New Deal programs and some of this relief is going to target African Americans, and some of it is going to specifically say African Americans cannot take advantage. So keep that in the back of your head while you're doing the read and the video and that kind of activities, because it is very hit or miss as far as African Americans. Can they receive it or can they not? Now, the three things that you should be able to do when you get finished with this module is explain what caused the Great Depression in the United States. I'm going to hit that in the first slide today. Describe the effect the Great Depression had on the economy of South Carolina. Of course, this is South Carolina history, not U.S. history, so the read and I will devote quite a bit of time to South Carolina. And number three, list some of the New Deal programs that were meant to help South Carolinians. There's over 30 New Deal programs. Your read touches on 7 or 8 of them, and all of those specifically are meant to help South Carolinians. Now, this picture here is an actual picture that was taken in New York City right after the stock market crash, which we'll get to here in a minute. This poor guy is trying to sell his $100 car. It is worth much more than $100, but he probably has literally zero money because the stock market crashed and he invested everything he had in the stock market. So now he's just trying to get enough money for food, clothing, and shelter for him and probably his family. So first off, how did the Great Depression begin? Now, during the Roaring Twenties, many Americans invested in the stock market. And if you know anything about the stock market, the more people that invest in a certain stock, the price goes up. Well, people were artificially inflating the price of stocks. Stocks that had no business being so expensive were expensive because people had money during the Roaring Twenties, especially in the North. Now, during the late part of the 1920s, you could kind of see a storm brewing. Debt was out of control. People wanted to get those new radios, get those new cars, and so they went and bought things on loan, on payments, and took out a lot of debt. Low wages. Wages were not going up even though the cost of living was going up. And we hit on this a lot last week. The decline of agriculture became more and more of a problem, especially in the South and in South Carolina. Now, on October 29th, the stock market crashed. Everyone basically tried to get out their money on the same day, which made the stock market crash. People lost thousands and thousands and even millions of dollars in the stock market. And you got to keep in mind, this is in the 20s and 30s, so $1 million is worth much more than it is today. Now, kind of on a sad note, South Carolina's depression period began before the crash. People were already losing their farms, losing their life savings, and it was all because of the decline of agriculture. Now, in South Carolina, farming, like I said, had been struggling for years. So South Carolina is going to have a longer depression period, and the Great Depression lasts longer here in the state. After the crash, banks had actually used people's money. So let's say I deposited $100 in my bank. The bank took my $100 and invested in the stock market. But then after the stock market failed, the bank just simply had no money to give me. So that freaked people out, causing long lines in the cities and outside of banks because everybody was trying to get their money, but there simply was no money to be had. Unemployment averaged about 25% during the Depression in South Carolina, so 1 out of every 4 people in the state did not have any means of income at all. And people began looking to government for the first time. This is a huge period in history because up until this, there are no government safety programs, there is no food stamps, there is no welfare, there is no anything that the government does as a safety net, because charities had taken care of everything, whether they be church charities or just charities without a religious affiliation. But now those charities can't keep up, so they start looking to the government for help. Now, President Hoover, you've probably heard of President Hoover. He is the president at the beginning of the Depression. He thought that it's just all part of a cycle. So eventually we're going to get ourselves out of this. Well, we didn't. So he lost re-election in one of the largest landslides in history, and President Roosevelt takes over. So, why does President Roosevelt take over? It's all about his New Deal program. When he's running for election, he says, I'm going to promise a New Deal, and I'm going to give you 3 R's. I'm going to provide relief, I'm going to provide recovery, and then I'm going to reform everything so this never happens again. So those were his 3 R's, and the American people loved that they could just say, okay, 3 R's, he's going to help us out. Now, the New Deal, the Read is going to list many, many more New Deal programs than this. I just wanted to hit 4 that were very important to the nation and especially South Carolina. The SSA, or Social Security Act. As a working guy myself, I still get Social Security taken out of my check every time I get a paycheck. And the goal is when I become old, then Social Security is going to send me a check in my retirement and provide sort of like a safety net for elderly and disabled people. So that one is still around even today. The CCC, the Civilian Conservation Corps. Now, there's lots of pictures of young men working on parks, planting trees, planting flowers, pouring concrete so people can get into the park safely. Well, Myrtle Beach State Park, if you've ever been there, was built by the CCC. Now, this is one of those New Deal programs that is segregated in the fact that it does not even allow African Americans to join. This is a white young men only New Deal program. The FDIC, if you ever go with your parents inside the bank, you will see a little FDIC plaque. Basically, the FDIC is a government program that is still around today, and it ensures that if I go to try to withdraw my money from the bank, then the bank is going to have that money, which is huge. And of course, Santee Cooper. Now, Santee Cooper is the largest electricity provider in South Carolina today, and it was basically formed with New Deal funds. So that is something that only affects South Carolina, but President Roosevelt and his New Deal is what actually made it possible. So this week, the word of the week is New Deal, and I hope you guys are having a great week, and I will talk to you next week.